Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. Wow, as the title of this video suggests, I never thought I'd be making a video where I would ask why somebody would be hiding in a bathroom, but here we are. I think it's important to understand the context of what's going on here and why I'm pretty upset with Mr. Thaksin, just on a fundamental level. And it's like 15 years is coming to a head right now, is what it feels like. Because going back 15 years ago, we would have been sitting here going into August of 2010, and everybody's head was just kind of ringing from all of the violence and just the consternation of the riots and things that, and understand why I get so upset about this. I lived through all of this stuff, and it was all around me for a long time. It's not all about me. It was all around everybody that lived in the area that I live and work, but it was egged on by Mr. Thaksin, and much like his recent foray to the bathroom, which I'll get into in a moment, he egged this stuff on from a safe perch, by the way, in Cambodia, under the wing of Hun Sen, egged on what would result in this city burning and many losses of lives here. And, at the time, and many I think since then now, in retrospect especially, see that his so-called allies, the people that he was claiming he was speaking for, whatever, he left them in a bad position. He left them in the lurch, so to speak, in all of that. And, this foray into the bathroom, to my mind, is just one more chapter. The thumbnail that we have up is from that great movie, Scent of a Woman, and I'm going to use some blue language here, if you will, for a moment. But there's a great line where Al Pacino's character, talking about the young boy who won't rat out the other kid, he basically says, when the shit hits the fan, some guys run and some guys stay, And my observation in the history of observing Mr. Thaksin's conduct and behavior, he ain't a stayer. Let's just put it like that, And he ran off, and he was over in Cambodia, and he egged on what happened in 2010. Many people lost their lives. There was tons of fallout from that. It was terrible. Did he do anything to help anyone? No, And now here we are again in another situation. We're just egging on problems. I don't think that there's any doubt at this point that he and his clique, the Shinawatra clique, if you want to call it that, his daughter and whatnot at all, they basically their actions have resulted in serious loss of life along the border between Cambodia and Thailand. I don't think, I've done the videos, you can check the record, I have the receipts. That is not a hyperbolic or in any way rhetorical or in any way unfactual statement. The lead up to this, and by the way, when they were gone, and you can say whatever you want about the military government that began in 2014 and culminated with them leaving power in favor of the current coalition government, now rump coalition government with the departure of Boomjai Thai, that began in 2023, we had a time of some dozen years, we had no problems at the border. And one of the hallmarks of the administration prior to that era was that anytime there was some kind of domestic political tight spot that they would get into, you'd hear this border jingoism, and that's what they would use as a sort of distraction. Well, it didn't work very well this time. It led to a lot of people dying again. It's what upsets me so much is his actions caused people to die here in Bangkok in 2010. He didn't, and it caused me, when I heard about this, and I'll get into the bathroom thing here in a minute, when I heard about this, it reminded me of something a good friend of mine said at the time when we were watching the violence break out from down here in Siloam, down here near where our office is. This person told me, they said, You know, if Thaksin had the courage of his convictions, he'd be here. You know, he'd be like Gandhi in the March to the Sea or something like that, but he didn't. You know, it's all about self-interest. It's not about the Thai people. It's not about Thailand, as we'll get into here in a moment, as another person pointed out to him and caused him to have to spend a lot of extra time in the bathroom. And what bugs me about that is, you know, I understood at the time the thinking, the paradigm, the belief, the desires, if you will, the objectives of the red shirts, the so-called red shirts in 2010. I thought, especially in retrospect, I think it was very misguided, unfortunately, because guys like him were misguiding them. But, you know, I got it. With this person, we're talking about somebody who's doing this purely out of self-interest, you know, and as we've seen, when had some level of influence in Thai politics again, what did he bring in? World Economic Forum. His daughter had a meeting in the Purple Room with the envoy from the WEF. The digital wallet. Let's put Thailand in a bunch of extra debt at a time she didn't need it to foist digital money on the country that can be tracked, traced of every Thai person's financial transactions. What good was that for anybody? That's globalist totalitarianism. Meanwhile, another more localized example was, oh, let's have a casino, but let's let the foreigners run it all, and then it looked to me like let's jettison Boomjai Thai from the coalition so we can get the Interior Ministry, so I can put my guy in there because he would have the power to sign off on the ability to sell land to the casinos. And then the foreigners can not only run their own casino operation, but then they could have the land underneath it. What is that? That's the worst of all worlds for Thailand. All the societal ills of having legal gambling and none of the benefits accruing to Thailand. You know, again, it's just a constant refrain of this. You know, and where is he when the S hits the fan? Well, I'll tell you. And before I get into this directly, quote, the reason for the family feud, quoting directly from the Bangkok Post, bangkokpost.com, Puai Thai blames scam crackdown, not family feud, for border hostilities. First of all, Puai Thai, are you just going to be the answering service for Thaksin and the Shinawatra clique? Or are you going to be a party that cares about this country? That's my big question. Quoting directly, the Puai Thai party has dismissed allegations that the Thai-Cambodian border dispute stems from personal or political rivalries between the Shinawatra and Hun Sen families, instead attributing it to Phnom Penh's dissatisfaction with Thailand's aggressive crackdown on Cambodia-based online scam centers. Quoting further, Puai Thai party MP and spokesman Danuporn Punakanta said on Sunday that the root of the issue lies in Cambodia's leaders' discontent over Thailand's efforts to dismantle cross-border online scam operations based in Cambodia. Well, Hun Sen himself has come out and said stuff about this. I'm not saying he's necessarily the greatest source of unbiased, unvarnished truth, but, you know, we've heard the leaked phone call of Paetongtarn Shinawatra undermining our own forward area commander here in Thailand, which is concerning on multiple levels. But, I mean, I find it very disingenuous to say, oh, it's got nothing to do with this family feud. Really nothing to do with it, even though the fact that clearly the principles on this side of the border emanated from the Shinawatra family talking to the Hun Sen family. Quoting further, he pointed to Phnom Penh's refusal to join a planned trilateral mechanism and involving Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar to jointly tackle transnational cybercrime, claiming that it would handle the matter independently. Quote, it's not a conflict between individuals or political dynasties like the Shinawatra and Hun Sen families. Really? Are we supposed to not believe our lion eyes? Quoting further, Mr. Danuporn said, quote, it's about the fallout from cybercrime suppression. Key figures in Cambodia are being affected and there is growing evidence to support this. I don't even know what that means. That just sounds like nonsense to me. And again, you know, I want to believe that the Puai Thai party has the best interests of Thailand at heart. I've said before, I would, you know, if in the event that Ms. Paetongtarn's suspension results in her removal, which I'm not saying that that's a foregone conclusion, but it's hard for me to think that it wouldn't. especially in light of the fact that Sreda was removed and he wasn't suspended pending the removal. So, and the adjudication on her removal was taken up in a 9-0 decision by the Constitutional Court with a 7-2 decision that she should be suspended in the meantime. So, you know, it's hard for me to believe that she's not going to result in removal, but okay, we're not there yet. But I've talked about the fact that, you know, there's a third guy on the Puai party list who could be in line for PM. Why not go to him? Why deal with her? Well, does the current situation result in things operating to the betterment of the Shinawatra clique? Seems to. You know, and again, to just dismiss out of hand that this has nothing to do with any family feud, that's just ridiculous to my mind. That said, getting into this issue of the retreat to the bathroom here, quoting directly from an article I quoted before, but I didn't bring this up. You know, frankly, I don't know. I've hoped that things would sort of move in a direction that would be more positive. And so for that reason, I guess I didn't want to engage in, you know, maybe I was pulling my punches because I was hoping we could see things move in a more gentlemanly direction, but it's not. And I'm really tired. Yeah, one thing is a good thing. We do have a current ceasefire that appears as of the time of the making of this video to be sticking, if you will, and that's great. I don't want to get that, but that is its own thing. That's a good thing. But what led up to this, you know, I don't see how you say it wasn't this family feud. And everything that's happened the last 2 years, we were doing really well here in Thailand going into 2023. We were doing even better, frankly, I think, going into 2024. You know, we no longer could the international community really claim, oh, lack of democratic whatever. I'm sick of hearing that too. But you know, things were moving in a positive direction. And then another perfect example is apparently because of this guy's own ego, he just doesn't like cannabis. So we've seen a massive move against cannabis. 18,000 legal businesses here in Thailand have been harassed. They've been subjected to, in my opinion, you know, unsubstantiated violations of their own due process because they have licenses to do what they do. And just because this person's faction now has control, and I put control in quotation marks because, as we discussed, there's another article that I talked about. I believe it's Toxin is losing his magic and influence. I'll put that on screen, the title on screen. I'm not going to quote from it, but it's a good article. Those who are watching this video, check that out. It's not just me that has these concerns, and it's not just me that's observing that this person's magic and influence, so-called, is waning, because we're all sick of it. You know, I'm sure the 18,000 licensed cannabis operators are not really interested in the decisions of one tiny faction saying that, oh, you're no longer in business anymore because we say so. Not apropos of legislative due process and in line with the doctrine of codification in a civil law jurisdiction. Oh, no, we just feel like you shouldn't be doing this, so you're done. You know, or we're going to impose upon you what we say. Because we say so, we're going to impose upon you all these new rules and things. It's nonsensical. And you can point directly at the core coalition government, the rump coalition as I call it, because that's where this is all coming from. And a lot of this seems to be stemming from one guy's ego, you know. And again, leading into 2023, things were going in a positive direction. You know, it was really an example of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But what came in? Digital wallet was the first thing they tried to roll out. Put this country in an extra 10% debt to GDP ratio. Huge amount of money. I think it was like 1 trillion baht they wanted, which then got rolled back and cut off. And by the way, his own daughter actually ended up scrapping the thing. Right before she was suspended, they discontinued the whole notion of the handout to begin with, which Thais don't need a handout. You know, Thais need the government to get out of the way and let them do business. You know, they don't need digital money that gets tracked and traced wherever they go, can be turned on and off, and can have an expiration date, and they can set the terms of what you can buy with your own money. And that's what this core coalition government has brought us, you know, is this WEF nonsense. And, you know, maybe being in Dubai for the last 15 years, you've been drinking cocktails with the likes of Klaus Schwab, and these are the kind of things that you think are reasonable. Well, the little guy here in Thailand, that doesn't benefit him one little bit. In fact, it operates quite to his detriment. That said, getting into this article, let military complete their mission, or Thaksin, let military complete their mission, quote unquote. And as I discussed in another video, he's ejecting himself in the trade thing, which he has no business being in. It's under a non-disclosure agreement anyway. I don't understand how it's legal or proper in any context. I think it's a violation of the Political Parties Act, as somebody has discussed in various articles. It may be, that needs to be adjudicated. But on top of it, it's under a non-disclosure agreement. So only government actors are supposed to be talking about the thing or involved in the matter. Why was he? He's not in the government. He's not in a party. He's not in anything. Why are we putting up with this from this person? That said, quoting from this article, former Prime Minister, and as I brought up I'm getting a little flustered, and it's causing my thinking to become less than as acutely focused as I usually like it. But this really bothers me, and it bothers me because I lived through the machinations of this that caused people to die, and I feel like it's deja vu, or to quote Harry Carey, deja vu all over again. And people are dying as a result of these terrible policies and just, I don't know what you want to call it, egomania, And the point I'm trying to make in this was, in the prior video, injecting himself, how was that proper to be going up to these horribly disaffected areas that have seen loss of lives, loss of property, and then to be going up and going around, as we discussed in the other video, and say, hey, it's not me. Hey, what? Nobody needs that. Nobody wants that. Well, somebody down at the venue that he went to agreed with that. Quoting directly, former Prime Minister Thaksin-Shinawatra denies a family feud is behind the Thai-Cambodian border conflict, saying the military must be given a free hand to, quote, complete their mission, unquote, before any talks can take place. And then in a lower part of the article, which I didn't get to in a prior video, but the more I look at this, especially thinking about the past and everything that's happened, and especially now that we apparently have a ceasefire, I think it's important to note the factors that got us here, especially one particular factor, this guy. Quoting directly from the subtitle, he doesn't help Thai people, quote unquote. A tense moment arose at the municipality when a local woman identified as Mew approached Thaksin shouting, if you're friends, why did you let your friend kill Thais? Because he came out and said, oh, there's no feud between us. Well, there's no feud. Why is your friend lobbing mortars over the border? Quoting further, or missiles, I should say. Quoting further, Miss Mew said she had relatives displaced from Kantararak district in Sisaket and blamed Thaksin for not preventing the conflict despite his long-standing relationship with Hun Sen. I would even go on to argue look, I made the video about it. I felt like Miss Pei Tongtan's comments, which he seemed to be getting distanced from. People were sort of presuming she didn't have any insight or input from him in that discussion. My question is, do we know that? They've been saying, oh, he didn't know, or what I've heard is the implicit presumption is he wasn't involved in that. Well, do we know? And by the way, I made the video where I said, look, it looked a lot like appeasement. A lot like that. When you basically say, yeah, we'll give you whatever you want, and then that can signal that we're not as resolved or something over here on this side of the border, and that can lead to then further problems. Bad policy, bad execution, bad all across the board. Quoting further, quote, he doesn't help Thai people, only his own family. We've been abandoned. I didn't come here expecting him to take responsibility. He never listens to people like us, unquote. I'm reading that again. He doesn't help Thai people, only his own family. We've been abandoned. I didn't come here expecting him to take responsibility. He never listens to people like us. Quoting further, she later told reporters in English that she was saddened by the suffering of her fellow citizens and accused Thaksin of siding with Cambodia. Quote, if he's still supporting Hun Sen, the war won't end. Our people are helping their side, unquote. Following the confrontation, security officers escorted Miss Mew out of the building. Thaksin emerged from a restroom only after she had left, diffusing what had become a brief but emotionally charged disruption. Look, I go back to that. When the shit hits the fan, some guys run and some guys stay. So some woman comes to this thing who has legitimate beefs, legitimate grievances on exactly what you're saying, and you can't face her, this is just wrong. What are we doing here? This is nonsense. You know, this guy's 76 years old. At this point, we've seen 2 years of what he would like things to be like in Thailand, and it ain't going great. Maybe it's time to seriously consider the retirement that you claimed you were going into when you came back here in the first place.